There are chambers in this world from which the light retreats not out of duty, but out of dread. Mine was such a chamber, a studio perched in the uppermost tower of Ashworth Hall, where the November wind howled against stone walls, blackened by a century of sorrow. It was here, amid the smell of turpentine and decay, that I resolved to paint her one final time. My Eleanor, my beloved, my ruin. She had perished in the autumn when the leaves turned the color of dried blood. A fever took her, swiftly, mercilessly, and left me with nothing but the hollow echo of her laughter in empty hallways. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I could only remember the precise curve of her lips, the way candlelight danced in her dark eyes, the impossible stillness of her hands folded upon the deathbed. And so I painted. Night after night, I stood before the canvas, mixing pigments with trembling fingers, layering color upon color, as though I might somehow reconstitute her flesh from ochre and vermilion. My servants whispered that I had gone mad. Perhaps they were right. But madness, I discovered, has its own peculiar clarity, a sharpness of vision that the sane can never know. It was on the seventh night that I first noticed it, a subtle thing so slight that a rational mind would dismiss it as a trick of the flickering flame. The chest of the painted Eleanor appeared to rise, just once, just barely. A breath, captured not in oil, but drawn from some terrible well of impossible vitality. I stared for an hour, unmoving, and saw nothing more, but the seed of dread had been planted. By the 10th night, the portrait was exquisite, more lifelike than any work I had ever produced. Her skin seemed to possess warmth. Her eyes followed me as I paced the studio. And each morning, when the grey dawn crept through the curtains, I caught my own reflection in the window glass and recoiled. My cheeks had grown hollow, my eyes had sunken into violet shadows. I was diminishing, and the portrait was flourishing. I began to hear her voice at night, a whisper threaded through the silence, calling my name with a tenderness that made my blood run cold. "Edmund," she breathed from the canvas, "come closer. Let me see you." I pressed my ear to the painted surface and felt warmth radiating from within, as though a living heart beat somewhere behind the layers of pigment and linseed oil. My valet, Hargrove, found me collapsed upon the studio floor one morning, my fingernails cracked and bleeding, paint smeared across my face. He begged me to destroy the portrait. He spoke of curses and unnatural attachments, but I could no more destroy her image than I could have harmed the woman herself. She was all I had left, this breathing, whispering, impossible thing. On the 14th night, the portrait smiled. Not the gentle, melancholy smile I had painted, but something new, something I had never placed upon the canvas. A slow, deliberate curving of the lips that spoke not of love, but of hunger. I stumbled backward, knocking candles from their holders, and in the wild shadows that danced upon the walls, I saw her painted hand twitch, as though reaching for me through the veil of the canvas. I locked the studio door and did not return for 3 days. I wandered the empty halls of Ashworth like a phantom, barely able to lift my own weight. My skin had taken on the pallor of parchment. My hands shook with a palsy that no physician could explain. And through the floorboards above, I heard it, a rhythmic thumping, steady as a heartbeat, emanating from the sealed chamber where the portrait waited in darkness. When at last I could resist no longer, I threw open the studio door and beheld a sight that shattered the final remnants of my reason. The portrait had changed utterly. Eleanor's eyes were open wide, alive, glistening, wet with tears that rolled down painted cheeks and dripped from the frame onto the floor, in dark, viscous drops. Her lips moved ceaselessly, forming words I could not hear, but somehow understood. You promised we would never be parted. I felt myself drawn forward as though invisible hands pulled at my very soul. My feet moved without my command. My arms rose to embrace the canvas, and as my fingers touched the painted surface, it yielded, soft, warm, like living flesh. I felt her hands close around my wrists with a grip of iron, and the canvas began to swallow me, pulling me into its flat painted world of eternal stillness. I screamed, but no sound escaped the thickening air. They found the studio empty the following morning. The door was locked from the inside. The candles had burned to nothing. And upon the easel stood the portrait, but it had changed one final time. Where once there had been one figure, now there were two. A man and a woman, hand in hand, their painted eyes staring outward with an expression of serene and terrible contentment. Hargrove burned the portrait that very afternoon, but on quiet nights, the servants still hear whispering from the tower. Two voices intertwined, speaking words of love that no living soul was ever meant to hear.